Hello, everyone. My name is Drew Damiano. I work with United Water and Sanitation District. And I want to give you a very brief overview of one of the projects that we're working on. It's called SEEP. That stands for Subsurface Irrigation Efficiency Project. And you might ask yourself why we would be working with or on a project like this. Basically, what we're trying to do is, as you all know, the Colorado Water Plan has a certain amount, a small percentage of ag transfers that will still occur as we move forward. So 30 or 50 years, some ag transfers will occur from farms. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at that system and how we're going to reduce the impact on those ag communities. So we don't want to just go in and dry up the farms. We don't want to leave those farms fallow. We want to somehow reintroduce irrigation to those farms. And we've got a great group of people that we're working with. I don't know if you've stopped by our booth that's out there, but we have Colorado State University. They're doing a number of reports. They're doing the feasibility analysis for us. They're really helping us kind of pave a path on what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. We're also working with Netafim. It's the drip irrigation company that we work with. There are other drip irrigation companies. This just happened to be the one that we decided to partner with. Jewish Colorado, it's where a lot of this technology came from and was developed. 70 Ranch and Prada. And what are we going to do? What are we planning on doing with these reports and these feasibility? Well, what we want to do is we want to educate not only the farmers, but also the municipalities. So when these transfers do occur, that we can go back into those farms and we can re-irrigate using a reduced amount of water, using it in conjunction with a junior water right, and then supplementing it with some senior water rights that have been decreed and adjudicated. We want to be able to build a robust production field farm and see what we can grow with that combination of water. With that, we want to look at the relationship of deficit irrigation and the production. So there's a PowerPoint rolling through, and you'll see at some point we have many different zones on this farm. And we can look at each zone and we can deliver a certain percentage of water to each of those zones where we're only delivering 60% of what that crop needs, or maybe 70% or 80%. And looking at that and looking at how that affects the production and the yield of those crops will help us in the long term come up with a study that will help us kind of expand this to other farms and really help those ag communities keep these farms in production. We're not only going to look at how, but is it economically feasible for us to do this? It's not worth it to go out there and build these things and say, well, this farmer or this municipality is going to lose money time and time again. So we'll be looking at that as well. We just started this. This is just our second growing season. We have a lot to learn. But we hope in the next decade or so to come up with a study that tells us how much junior water rights we need, how much of the senior rights we need to hold back. And we'll see. One thing I am doing, I'm working with Doug. Hopefully we'll have another work session at the annual Water Congress where we can talk about other ATM and get together with other municipalities, come up with better ideas, and really kind of fine-tune this idea with others. And we know there's a lot of great minds out there, and that's what we want to do. We want to work with those people. We are having a grand opening at this farm. We'd like to extend an invitation to everyone here. We have a number of invitations out on our table. We'd love for all of you to join us. It's September 21st. It's at 10 a.m. This farm is just outside of Kersey, Colorado, so it's really close. Not really, but so yeah, come join us, grab an invite. I'd also like to say thank you to Jason Von Lemke. He was the lead on this project. He works with me. He went from the beginning to the end. He did everything out there. He built the building. He installed the tape. He really did a wonderful job. And I also like to thank Stephanie Ruiz. She helped with the final design. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time, and I hope you travel safe.
Thank you, Drew. We had Ilana Dar here at our summer conference about 10 years ago from Israel. I don't know if some of you may remember that. And it's just fascinating, the investment that's happening there. Jill and I have had a chance to travel to Israel twice, and just the investment that they've made in their water infrastructure is something we've really got a lot of, we can learn a lot from. Next, we're going to go to Dan Higgins to talk to us about the Southern Delivery System.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for your commitment to staying here this late in the program. I appreciate your willingness to give me a chance to share some of the successes you've heard about. Others have alluded to the Southern Delivery System project throughout the conference. And I have the privilege of being here today to actually talk about a major program that's in service. And this is actually done. I've heard a lot about projects. Pardon me, I'm looking for this must be the clicker. Heard a lot about projects that are basically being planned, but I'm really, really happy to report that Southern Delivery System Phase 1 was put into service on April 28th of this year. And roughly it was 20 years ago, in 1996, SDS was identified in a water planning document as our next major delivery system. And so it's kind of more testimony of the fact that it does take quite a number of years to get a major project like this online. However, it is online, and so there's a lot of cooperation. We've got regional partners here. It's Colorado Springs, Security Water District, City of Fountain, and Pueblo West are all participants. We delivered the project on time. The construction effort was actually, we started construction really in earnest in about 2010, so it took quite a number of years to get it finished. But at the end of the day, we were $160 million under budget. So in terms of what is SDS, when I look at this, sorry, at this other screen over here, originates in Pueblo Reservoir. And from Pueblo Reservoir, moving north up to Colorado Springs, there are three pump stations that are raw water up to the treatment plant. And we've got one finished water pump station and roughly 50 miles of pipeline that connect all those facilities. And the treatment plant, as I said, it's a 50 million gallon per day facility now. The whole project in terms of its phasing is basically studied to go beyond 100 million gallons a day. So right now what we've done is we've just installed what we needed in phase 1, and we're trying to be mindful of our ratepayers and not necessarily build anything more than what we needed right away. But when we look at phase 2, what you're going to see, you see it in this slide actually, what's highlighted in red are two reservoirs. One of them is raw water storage and one of them is return flow storage. And you've seen in many of the presentations this week the importance of storage in the future. And we've got these two facilities already studied, permitted, and it's a matter of timing for us when we construct these. When we talk about regional benefits, I'd say the timing of SDS really couldn't have been better for a variety of reasons. For those that are in the Pueblo West community, the portion of the project that was built closest to Pueblo Reservoir actually was put into service early to address a couple of breaks on the primary line that feeds the community of Pueblo West. After that, we've had, some of you probably seen this in the press, the issue about groundwater contamination in the area south of Colorado Springs that affected Security and Fountain. We've got in the audience, Roy Hield is here with the Security Water District, and I saw Mike Fink earlier with Fountain. But we were able to work together and help with the issues this summer where the groundwater contamination was actually a very significant issue for both of those communities. So what are we doing now? As I mentioned, SDS came from a planning document that was published in 1996. So in about 2014, we reinitiate these long-term planning efforts. The planning continues all the time, but we've put another project in motion, and that's our Integrated Water Resource Plan. It started in 2014, and what we're doing now is we're actually moving more and more into an Integrated Water Resource Plan where we're looking at our long-range build-out. We're examining these things you see on this slide, and you've heard about them so many times today in terms of supply, demand, quality, and integration and multi-beneficiary projects. And so we anticipate we'll be identifying those kinds of things in our long-range plan. And when I say long-range, I'm talking, this is something that we're looking 50 years out. So in terms of goals of this new plan, you've heard some of this in other presentations this week already, but we're looking at our current water system. We're all tasked with looking at risks and opportunities, our water resource strategies, and again, looking out for 50 years. And it's an absolute treat to be in a position where we've just put that major delivery system online. And it gives us that opportunity to look very, very carefully at the best opportunities moving forward. So Eric, I look to you, having heard you say a number of times, and others that have been involved in a number of stakeholder processes, permitting processes. It's taken a great deal of time, but we've had great leadership on our project. A gentleman named John Friedel, some of you may know, he's the project director. We've had the help of Mr. David Robbins that many of you know. And it's just a matter of the commitment you're showing here today, staying through the end of the conference. That's what it takes. You just have to keep after it, knowing that you can get to the finish line. So be happy to take any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'll hand off the microphone.
Dan, it was just amazing the timing of getting the Southern Delivery System and really what could have been a bit of a crisis down there in security and Fountain and stuff. So
I agree. Others have said it's better to be lucky than good, and I think that's been the case for us in several areas on this project. But you're right. Thanks.
Great. Fantastic. Okay, is Kathleen Stacks here? There she is. Okay, come on up and talk to us for a moment.
I didn't want you guys to, finish off the conference without talking about a little oil and gas, so which is always an exciting topic. I wanted to kind of give you guys an update. There's a lot of work going on in the oil and gas industry related to produced water. And for those of you who don't know what produced water is, it's the water that comes back up from an oil and gas well. It includes both the water that the company injected down into the well to frack the formation, and then also whatever water is down in that formation that they're actually trying to get the oil and gas out of. And in some places in the state, it's an actually pretty significant amount of water. And so part of the conversation at this point is, what do we do with that water? And knowing in Colorado that we have a water shortage, industry is trying to figure out if there's other things to do with it, then rather than pumping it back into the ground as a waste. So there are actually quite a few companies that are reusing this water, particularly out on the West Slope. We've got about a 90% rate of reuse and recycling of the produced water. Part of the challenge is, though, that there's the ownership and liability surrounding produced water is pretty fuzzy at this point. So it's a non-tributary source of water, and in some places you can get an actual discharge permit from CDPHE and put the water into streams or rivers. But again, you end up with a questionable, can that count as can somebody else sort of count on that water in the long term? And so we're trying to figure out, working with the Division of Water Resources and the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission and CDPHE, trying to figure out how to actually do this. And we've got some companies that are, there's an example down in Texas where Anadarko is trying to figure out whether or not they can use produced water in agricultural use. And so, putting it back, reuse for oil and gas is essentially the main use of it at this point in time. But if they're cleaning it up, could this actually be another source of water to replenish streams and provide habitat and increase flows on rivers that need more water? And so the conversation is ongoing. There's been a lot of work. The Groundwater Protection Council met down in Oklahoma City this last week, and they had 2 days of discussion about reuse of produced water. And so kind of wanted to flag it for you guys, just pay attention to it. I think one of the things that they're talking about is what is the market, what is the need? And then once we sort of figure out whether or not the water community wants to look at this as a water source, then starting to figure out how do we deal with the ownership issues and the liability issues, because at this point in time it's considered a waste. And if you get a discharge permit and you put it into the stream, that's great, but if you spill it on the way to the stream, it's an actual reportable exploration and production waste, and an operator can face a fine. So it's sort of it's a funky regulatory system at this point in time, but with quite a bit of potential, because there's a lot of oil and gas development happening in Colorado, across the state. One of the challenges, if you look at a state like Oklahoma, is that they're injecting all that as waste, and we've got seismicity issues down there. And so that's sort of the driving factor for them looking at this. Here, it's more of a water shortage issue that may drive this conversation a lot. So that's kind of all I have to report on it, unless anybody has any questions. I encourage you to be engaged in these conversations, because I think there's a lot of movement and development happening, and it's going to be a complicated one to figure out for sure.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, we can follow up with questions perhaps later, and we need to stay on time. So unless there's any quick question for Kathleen. Seeing none? Thank you. Just leave the mic there. Okay, or actually bring it down. All right, thank you, Kathleen. Just go ahead.